Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that Schneider Electric's risk assessment process for its new smart grid technology deployment is heavily reliant on historical data from previous infrastructure projects and focuses primarily on technical failure modes. While this approach has identified some known risks, there is concern that it may not adequately capture the full spectrum of potential threats. Which of the following approaches would best enhance the comprehensiveness and effectiveness of the risk identification phase? Option A. Implement a structured process that combines top-down strategic risk analysis with bottom-up operational risk identification, actively engaging diverse stakeholders across all relevant departments and levels of the organization. Option B. Focus exclusively on risks that can be quantified with high confidence using existing sensor data and performance metrics from the new technology itself. Option C. Expand the historical data analysis to include a wider range of past projects, even those in unrelated industries, to identify any potential, however remote, parallels. Option D. Delegate the entire risk identification process to the engineering team responsible for the smart grid technology, as they possess the most in-depth technical knowledge. Correct answer is A. Implement a structured process that combines top-down strategic risk analysis with bottom-up operational risk identification, actively engaging diverse stakeholders across all relevant departments and levels of the organization. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient risk identification with the potential for overlooking critical, albeit less obvious, risks. The pressure to deliver a comprehensive risk assessment quickly can lead to a superficial approach, potentially missing subtle but significant threats to Schneider Electric's operations or reputation. The challenge lies in ensuring that the risk assessment process is robust enough to capture a wide spectrum of risks, not just those that are immediately apparent or easily quantifiable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted risk identification strategy that combines top-down strategic risk analysis with bottom-up operational risk identification. This ensures that both high-level business risks and granular, day-to-day operational risks are considered. By engaging diverse stakeholders across different departments and levels, the organization benefits from a broader range of perspectives, increasing the likelihood of identifying a comprehensive set of risks. This aligns with best professional practice in risk management, which emphasizes inclusivity and thoroughness to ensure that all potential threats are surfaced for subsequent assessment and mitigation. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing corporate governance and internal controls, implicitly or explicitly, require such comprehensive risk identification to ensure the resilience and sustainability of the business. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on historical data and past incidents. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it is inherently backward-looking and may fail to identify emerging risks or risks associated with new technologies, market shifts, or evolving regulatory landscapes. Relying only on past events can lead to a false sense of security and an incomplete risk profile. Another incorrect approach prioritizes risks that are easily quantifiable and have readily available data. This is a professional failure as it neglects qualitative risks, such as reputational damage, ethical breaches, or strategic misalignments, which can have profound impacts even if they are difficult to measure numerically. Effective risk management requires considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. A third incorrect approach involves delegating the entire risk identification process to a single department without broader consultation. This is a significant ethical and professional failing, as it limits the scope of input, potentially leading to blind spots and an incomplete understanding of risks that span multiple functions or departments. It undermines the principle of shared responsibility for risk management within an organization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured yet flexible approach to risk identification. This involves defining clear objectives for the risk assessment, identifying relevant risk categories, and employing a variety of techniques, e.g., brainstorming, interviews, workshops, scenario analysis, checklists, to elicit risks from a wide range of sources. Crucially, professionals must foster a culture where employees feel empowered to report potential risks without fear of reprisal. The process should be iterative, allowing for refinement as new information becomes available or as the business environment changes. This systematic and inclusive methodology ensures that the risk assessment is both comprehensive and relevant, supporting informed decision-making and effective risk mitigation strategies. Question 2. Investigation of a Schneider Electric project manager who receives an unsolicited email from a supplier containing preliminary, unannounced details about a competitor's upcoming product launch that could significantly impact Schneider Electric's market share. The project manager is considering whether to immediately incorporate this information into their strategic planning for an upcoming product development cycle. Option A. Immediately use the information to adjust the project plan and gain a competitive advantage. Option B. Consult with Schneider Electric's legal department to determine the materiality and public status of the information before taking any action. Option C. Share the information with other project managers within Schneider Electric to foster collaborative strategy development. Option D. Disregard the information as it is from an external, unverified source and not officially communicated. The correct answer is B. Consult with Schneider Electric's legal department to determine the materiality and public status of the information before taking any action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to secure a competitive advantage and the ethical imperative to maintain fair and transparent market practices. The pressure to act quickly on potentially sensitive information, coupled with the ambiguity of what constitutes material non-public information in a rapidly evolving market, requires careful judgment and a robust understanding of regulatory boundaries. Misinterpreting these boundaries can lead to severe legal and reputational consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing adherence to regulatory frameworks designed to ensure market integrity. Specifically, it aligns with principles of fair disclosure and insider trading prevention. By seeking clarification from the legal department and refraining from any action until the information's materiality and public status are confirmed, the professional upholds their fiduciary duty and avoids potential violations of securities laws. This proactive and cautious stance is ethically sound and legally defensible, safeguarding both the individual and the company. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately acting on the information to gain a competitive edge. This constitutes a potential violation of insider trading regulations, which prohibit trading securities based on material non-public information. The ethical failure lies in exploiting an unfair informational advantage, undermining market fairness. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the information as insignificant without proper due diligence. This could lead to overlooking critical market-moving information, potentially resulting in poor strategic decisions and a failure to act in the company's best interest. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to thoroughly assess all relevant information. A third incorrect approach is to share the information with colleagues outside of the immediate decision-making circle without proper authorization or consideration of its non-public nature. This risks a broader dissemination of potentially material non-public information, increasing the likelihood of an inadvertent leak or insider trading by others, thereby breaching confidentiality and regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the nature of the information and its potential impact. Second, assess whether the information is material and non-public. Third, consult internal policies and relevant legal counsel to understand the regulatory implications. Fourth, act with caution and transparency, prioritizing compliance and ethical conduct over immediate gains. This framework ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and legal requirements. Question 3. What factors determine the ethical and regulatory acceptability of deploying AI-powered customer service chatbots within Schneider Electric's operations? Option A. The extent to which the AI system's decision-making processes are transparent, the data used for training is free from bias, and customer consent for data usage is explicitly obtained. Option B. The perceived novelty and technological advancement of the AI chatbot and its ability to mimic human conversation patterns effectively. Option C. The speed at which the AI chatbot can resolve customer inquiries and the potential for cost reduction in customer support operations. Option D. The assumption that AI algorithms are inherently objective and the focus on achieving market leadership through rapid AI adoption. Correct answer is A. The extent to which the AI system's decision-making processes are transparent, the data used for training is free from bias, and customer consent for data usage is explicitly obtained. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory implications of using artificial intelligence (AI) in customer-facing interactions. The core challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of AI, such as efficiency and personalized service, with the risks of bias, lack of transparency, and potential for discriminatory outcomes. Ensuring fairness, accountability, and compliance with data protection regulations is paramount, especially when dealing with sensitive customer data and decisions that could impact individuals. Careful judgment is required to navigate these complexities and uphold Schneider Electric's commitment to ethical business practices and customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a comprehensive risk assessment and mitigation strategy, grounded in ethical AI principles and relevant data protection regulations. This involves proactively identifying potential biases in the AI algorithms and training data, implementing robust testing and validation procedures to ensure fairness and accuracy, and establishing clear guidelines for human oversight and intervention. Transparency with customers about the use of AI and the data being collected is also crucial, aligning with principles of informed consent and data privacy. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes customer well-being, regulatory compliance, e.g., GDPR principles of fairness, lawfulness, and transparency, and the long-term reputation of Schneider Electric by embedding ethical considerations into the AI deployment lifecycle. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the potential cost savings and efficiency gains of AI implementation without adequately addressing the associated risks. This approach fails to consider the regulatory requirements for data protection and fair treatment of individuals, potentially leading to violations of data privacy laws and ethical breaches. The lack of proactive bias detection and mitigation can result in discriminatory outcomes, damaging customer relationships and exposing the company to legal and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach prioritizes rapid deployment and market advantage over thorough ethical review and customer consent. This can lead to the use of AI systems that are not fully understood, tested, or transparent, increasing the likelihood of unintended consequences, such as privacy violations or biased decision-making. Such an approach disregards the ethical imperative to inform and protect customers, potentially eroding trust and violating principles of data stewardship. A third incorrect approach relies on the assumption that AI systems are inherently objective and require no further scrutiny beyond their initial development. This overlooks the reality that AI can inherit and amplify biases present in the data it is trained on. Without ongoing monitoring and validation, such systems can perpetuate unfairness and discrimination, leading to regulatory noncompliance and ethical failures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, ethically driven decision-making framework when implementing AI. This involves 1. Identifying stakeholders and their interests, customers, employees, regulators, the company. 2. Understanding the potential benefits and risks of AI deployment, including ethical and regulatory implications. 3. Conducting thorough due diligence on AI technologies, including data sources, algorithms, and potential biases. 4. Developing clear policies and procedures for AI governance, oversight, and accountability. 5. Ensuring transparency and obtaining informed consent from customers where appropriate. 6. Establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring, evaluation, and continuous improvement of AI systems. 7. Prioritizing compliance with all applicable laws and regulations, such as data protection and anti-discrimination legislation. Question 4. When evaluating a situation where an employee of Schneider Electric has inadvertently learned of a potential non-public acquisition target during the course of their duties, and their spouse is an active investor, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with ethical standards and regulatory frameworks? Option A. Advise the spouse to avoid any stock market activity related to the industry of the potential acquisition target without explicitly mentioning the confidential information. Option B. Take no action, assuming the spouse will not act on any perceived hints or that the information is not material enough to warrant concern. Option C. Immediately report the information and the potential conflict of interest to the company's compliance department or legal counsel. Option D. Discuss the situation with a close friend who also works in a different department at Schneider Electric to gauge their opinion on how to proceed. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the information and the potential conflict of interest to the company's compliance department or legal counsel. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving potential conflicts of interest and the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality. A Schneider Electric employee in a position of trust has access to sensitive, non-public information about a potential acquisition target. The temptation to leverage this information for personal financial gain, even indirectly through a family member, is significant. This requires careful judgment to uphold professional integrity and adhere to strict compliance guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach is to immediately report the situation to the designated compliance officer or legal department. This aligns with Schneider Electric's internal policies and broader regulatory expectations regarding insider trading and conflicts of interest. By proactively disclosing the potential conflict and the information obtained, the employee demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This allows the company to manage the situation appropriately, preventing any actual or perceived breaches of confidentiality or insider trading laws. This approach prioritizes transparency, accountability, and the protection of the company's reputation and legal standing. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to do nothing and assume the family member will not act on the information. This is a failure to report a potential conflict of interest and a breach of confidentiality. It creates a significant risk of insider trading, which carries severe legal penalties for both the individual and the company. Ethically, it violates the duty of loyalty and care owed to Schneider Electric and its stakeholders. Another incorrect approach is to subtly hint to the family member about the potential acquisition without explicitly stating the information. This is still a form of information leakage and a violation of confidentiality. While it may seem less direct, it still creates a risk of the information being used for personal gain, thereby facilitating insider trading. It represents a deliberate attempt to circumvent reporting obligations while still exploiting privileged information. A third incorrect approach is to discuss the situation with a trusted colleague outside of the official reporting channels. While seemingly a way to seek advice, this can inadvertently spread sensitive information and create further compliance risks. It bypasses the established procedures for handling such matters and could lead to unauthorized disclosure, potentially implicating both individuals in a breach of confidentiality and compliance protocols. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework of proactive disclosure and adherence to established compliance procedures. When faced with a potential conflict of interest or access to material non-public information, the immediate step should be to consult internal policies and report the situation to the appropriate compliance or legal authority. This involves a clear understanding of one's ethical obligations, the company's code of conduct, and relevant regulations. Documenting the disclosure and any subsequent guidance received is also crucial for demonstrating due diligence. Question 5. When evaluating potential risks to Schneider Electric's operations, which approach to risk assessment best demonstrates a commitment to proactive and comprehensive risk management, considering both the likelihood and potential impact of identified threats? Option A. Addressing risks that are easiest to implement controls for, regardless of their potential severity or likelihood. Option B. Prioritizing risks based on a matrix that plots their likelihood of occurrence against the severity of their potential impact on business operations, safety, and compliance. Option C. Relying exclusively on historical incident data to identify and assess all potential future risks. Option D. Focusing mitigation efforts primarily on risks that have occurred most frequently in the past, assuming these are the most critical to address. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing risks based on a matrix that plots their likelihood of occurrence against the severity of their potential impact on business operations, safety, and compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment beyond simple identification. The challenge lies in prioritizing risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, and then determining the most appropriate mitigation strategies within the context of Schneider Electric's operational environment and regulatory obligations. Effective risk assessment is not just about listing potential problems, but about understanding their interconnectedness and their potential to disrupt business objectives, compromise safety, or violate compliance standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of identified risks. This includes considering both the likelihood of a risk occurring and the severity of its potential impact on the business, its employees, and its stakeholders. By categorizing risks based on this analysis, appropriate resources and mitigation efforts can be allocated effectively. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that emphasize due diligence and proactive risk management to ensure business continuity and compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the most frequently occurring risks, without considering their potential impact, fails to address potentially catastrophic but less frequent events. This could lead to a misallocation of resources and leave the organization vulnerable to significant disruptions. Ethically, this approach could be seen as negligent if it overlooks risks that, while infrequent, could cause severe harm. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the ease of mitigation, rather than their actual impact or likelihood, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to addressing minor issues while neglecting more significant threats. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and can result in a false sense of security. From a regulatory perspective, this could be viewed as a failure to implement a robust risk management system, potentially leading to non-compliance with duties of care. A further incorrect approach that relies solely on historical data without considering emerging threats or changes in the operational landscape is also flawed. While historical data is valuable, it may not adequately predict future risks, especially in a dynamic industry like energy management and automation. This can lead to a reactive rather than proactive risk management posture, which is often insufficient to meet regulatory expectations for foresight and preparedness. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment methodology. This typically includes 1. Risk identification, brainstorming and documenting all potential risks. 2. Risk analysis, evaluating the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 3. Risk evaluation, prioritizing risks based on the analysis. 4. Risk treatment, developing and implementing strategies to mitigate, transfer, accept, or avoid prioritized risks. 5. Risk monitoring and review, continuously assessing the effectiveness of risk treatments and identifying new or changing risks. This iterative process ensures that risk management remains relevant and effective. Question 6. Quality control measures reveal a consistent deviation in the performance of a newly manufactured electrical component, falling outside the acceptable tolerance range. The production team is under pressure to meet a critical delivery deadline for a major client. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Implement a minor adjustment to the assembly process based on initial observations and proceed with production to meet the deadline. Option B. Publicly attribute the deviation to a specific manufacturing error by an individual operator and take disciplinary action. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis to identify the underlying reasons for the deviation and develop targeted corrective actions before any further production or shipment. Option D. Immediately halt all production of the component and issue a full product recall to prevent any potentially faulty units from reaching customers. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis to identify the underlying reasons for the deviation and develop targeted corrective actions before any further production or shipment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining product quality and meeting aggressive production deadlines. The pressure to expedite the manufacturing process can lead to compromises in quality control, potentially impacting customer safety, product reliability, and Schneider Electric's reputation. The need for a swift and effective resolution requires a deep understanding of quality management principles and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough root cause analysis before implementing any corrective actions. This aligns with best professional practices in quality management, emphasizing a systematic and data-driven approach. By investigating the underlying reasons for the deviation, the team can ensure that the implemented solutions are effective and prevent recurrence, rather than merely addressing the symptoms. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining product integrity and adhering to industry standards and Schneider Electric's internal quality policies, which are designed to ensure customer satisfaction and safety. Correct approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately halting production and recalling all affected units without a clear understanding of the scope or cause of the defect. This is a disproportionate response that can lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and unnecessary disruption to customers. It fails to demonstrate a reasoned, analytical approach to problem solving and may violate principles of proportionality in corrective actions. Another incorrect approach is to implement a superficial fix, such as a minor adjustment to the assembly line, without investigating the root cause. This approach risks masking the underlying problem, leading to its reappearance and potentially more severe consequences later. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to robust quality assurance and can be seen as a failure to uphold professional responsibility for product quality. A third incorrect approach might be to blame individual employees without a proper investigation. This fosters a negative work environment, discourages open reporting of issues, and fails to address systemic problems that may be contributing to the quality deviation. It is an unprofessional and unethical response that undermines the principles of teamwork and continuous improvement. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should follow a structured problem-solving framework. This typically involves 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact. 2. Gathering all relevant data and evidence. 3. Conducting a thorough root cause analysis using appropriate tools, e.g., Ishikawa diagrams 5 whys. 4. Developing and evaluating potential solutions based on the root cause. 5. Implementing the most effective solution and verifying its efficacy. 6. Documenting the entire process and communicating findings to relevant stakeholders. This systematic approach ensures that issues are addressed comprehensively and that lessons learned are integrated into future processes. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that switching to a significantly cheaper component from a new supplier could reduce manufacturing costs by 15%. However, preliminary testing indicates a slight but measurable decrease in the component's durability under extreme conditions, though it still meets the minimum specified performance threshold. The existing supplier has a long-standing relationship with Schneider Electric and has consistently met quality standards, but their component is more expensive. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Immediately adopt the cheaper component from the new supplier to realize the cost savings, as it meets the minimum specified performance threshold. Option B. Engage with the existing supplier to understand the cost drivers of their component and explore potential cost reduction strategies, while simultaneously initiating a more rigorous, long-term testing protocol for the new supplier's component to fully assess its performance and reliability under various operational scenarios before making any decision. Option C. Terminate the relationship with the existing supplier and source exclusively from the new supplier, assuming the cost savings outweigh any minor perceived quality difference. Option D. Reject the new supplier's component outright due to the slight decrease in durability and continue with the more expensive, but proven, component from the existing supplier without further investigation into cost reduction opportunities. Correct answer is B. Engage with the existing supplier to understand the cost drivers of their component and explore potential cost reduction strategies, while simultaneously initiating a more rigorous, long-term testing protocol for the new supplier's component to fully assess its performance and reliability under various operational scenarios before making any decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate cost savings against potential long-term risks and regulatory compliance. The decision-maker must consider not only the financial implications, but also the ethical responsibilities and the potential impact on Schneider Electric's reputation and stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to navigate the complexities of supply chain management, product safety, and adherence to relevant regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes due diligence and proactive risk mitigation. By engaging with the supplier to understand the root cause of the quality issue and collaboratively developing a corrective action plan, Schneider Electric demonstrates a commitment to product integrity and responsible sourcing. This aligns with ethical principles of transparency and accountability, and it helps ensure compliance with any applicable product safety standards or quality management regulations that Schneider Electric is subject to within its operational jurisdiction. This approach fosters a stronger, more reliable supply chain and protects the company from potential future liabilities. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings of the cheaper component fails to acknowledge the potential for increased warranty claims, product recalls, or reputational damage if the lower quality component leads to product failures. This approach exhibits a disregard for product quality and customer safety, which could violate consumer protection laws and ethical standards. Another incorrect approach that immediately terminates the relationship without attempting to resolve the issue with the supplier overlooks the potential for constructive collaboration and may lead to unnecessary disruption and increased sourcing costs. This could be seen as an unprofessional and potentially damaging business practice. A third incorrect approach that accepts the cheaper component without further investigation or assurance of quality ignores the fundamental responsibility to ensure product safety and compliance, potentially exposing the company to significant legal and financial repercussions if the component fails to meet required specifications. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a failure to uphold ethical obligations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves a thorough risk assessment, consideration of all relevant stakeholders, and adherence to established ethical guidelines and regulatory requirements. This includes seeking to understand the underlying issues, exploring collaborative solutions, and making informed decisions based on a comprehensive evaluation of potential benefits and risks, rather than solely on immediate cost advantages. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood and high impact for a specific operational disruption. A proposed cost-saving initiative involves reducing the frequency of a key preventative maintenance check that currently mitigates this risk. What is the most appropriate next step for the project manager? Option A. Immediately implement the cost-saving initiative to achieve the targeted financial benefits. Address any potential disruption if and when it occurs. Option B. Conduct a formal risk reassessment to determine the residual risk level after the proposed change, and document any increased risk exposure and propose mitigation strategies for management approval. Option C. Consult with the finance department to confirm the financial savings, and then implement the initiative, deferring any risk assessment until after the savings have been realized. Option D. Proceed with the cost-saving initiative as planned, assuming that the impact of a disruption, while high, is unlikely to occur frequently enough to warrant the current maintenance expenditure. The correct answer is B. Conduct a formal risk reassessment to determine the residual risk level after the proposed change, and document any increased risk exposure and proposed mitigation strategies for management approval. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost savings with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. The pressure to reduce expenses can lead to overlooking critical risk mitigation strategies, potentially exposing Schneider Electric to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost-cutting measures do not compromise the integrity of the company's risk management framework. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven assessment of residual risks after implementing cost-saving measures. This aligns with the principles of robust risk management, which mandate that any reduction in controls or mitigation efforts must be justified by a clear understanding of the remaining risk exposure. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulatory frameworks that require organizations to maintain adequate internal controls and to proactively identify and manage risks. This approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the company's overall risk appetite and compliance obligations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings without a subsequent risk reassessment fails to meet regulatory expectations for ongoing risk monitoring and control effectiveness. This could be seen as a violation of internal control policies and potentially broader compliance requirements that mandate a systematic approach to risk management. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing cost-saving measures that directly reduce the effectiveness of existing controls without any form of compensatory measure or documented risk acceptance represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a disregard for established risk management protocols and could lead to a breach of duty of care. A further incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single department head to justify the reduction of controls, rather than a systematic risk assessment, is professionally unsound. This bypasses the established governance processes for risk management and can lead to inconsistent and potentially dangerous decision-making. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objective, cost savings, then systematically evaluates the impact of proposed changes on identified risks. This involves consulting risk registers, control documentation, and relevant policies. If proposed changes affect controls, a formal risk reassessment must be conducted, documenting residual risks and obtaining appropriate management approval for any increased risk exposure. This process ensures that decisions are transparent, justifiable, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory/ethical standards. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that customer data collected during the installation of Schneider electric smart home devices, including usage patterns and environmental readings, has been aggregated for potential use in developing predictive maintenance algorithms. However, the initial data collection consent forms only explicitly mention data usage for product functionality and direct customer support. Which of the following actions best represents the appropriate response to ensure compliance with data protection principles? Option A. Immediately proceed with using the aggregated data for predictive maintenance, as the benefits of improved service outweigh any potential privacy concerns. Option B. Conduct a thorough review to determine if the aggregated data can be used for predictive maintenance under the existing consent, or if additional consent or a different legal basis is required, considering data minimization and purpose limitation. Option C. Anonymize the aggregated data by removing direct identifiers, and then proceed with its use for predictive maintenance. Option D. Delete all aggregated data to avoid any potential regulatory scrutiny, even if it means losing valuable insights for service improvement. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review to determine if the aggregated data can be used for predictive maintenance under the existing consent, or if additional consent or a different legal basis is required, considering data minimization and purpose limitation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and compliance within Schneider Electric's operations, specifically concerning customer data collected during product installations. The challenge lies in balancing the need for data utilization for service improvement with the stringent requirements of data protection regulations. Misinterpreting or inadequately applying these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure all data handling practices align with the applicable legal framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the collected data against the Schneider Electric's internal data privacy policy and the relevant data protection legislation. This includes identifying the specific types of data collected, the purpose for which it was collected, and whether explicit consent was obtained for its use in service improvement initiatives. If the data was collected for a primary purpose, e.g., product functionality, and its use for service improvement constitutes a secondary purpose, a legal basis for this secondary use must be established, such as legitimate interest balanced against the individual's rights, or obtaining further consent. This approach ensures that data processing is lawful, fair, and transparent, adhering to principles like data minimization and purpose limitation, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with using the data for service improvement without any further review, assuming that any data collected is implicitly available for all company purposes. This fails to acknowledge the principle of purpose limitation, a cornerstone of data protection laws, which dictates that data should only be processed for the specific purposes for which it was collected. Another incorrect approach would be to anonymize the data without verifying if the anonymization process is robust enough to prevent re-identification, which could still lead to regulatory breaches if re-identification is possible. A third incorrect approach would be to delete all collected data immediately without assessing its potential value for legitimate service improvement, which, while seemingly cautious, might overlook opportunities for innovation and customer benefit that could be achieved through compliant data usage. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, identify the specific data in question and its origin. Second, consult the relevant data protection regulations and internal company policies. Third, determine the legal basis for processing the data for the intended purpose. Fourth, assess the risks and benefits of the proposed data usage. Fifth, implement appropriate safeguards and obtain necessary consents or justifications. Finally, document the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen course of action. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are legally sound, ethically defensible, and aligned with best professional practices in data management. Question 10. The assessment process reveals a candidate's approach to a situation where a standard procurement procedure for a minor component appears to be causing an unexpected delay in a critical project timeline. The candidate is aware of a slightly different, but seemingly equivalent, component available from a different supplier that could be procured much faster, potentially saving the project from missing a key deadline. The candidate is considering ordering this alternative component without formally initiating a new procurement request or seeking explicit approval for the deviation, believing it to be a practical solution to an urgent problem. Option A. Procure the alternative component immediately to ensure the project timeline is met, assuming the slight difference in specification is negligible and the urgency justifies the bypass of standard procedure. Option B. Inform the project manager and procurement department of the potential delay and the alternative component option, and follow the established procedure for approving deviations or sourcing alternative materials, even if it takes additional time. Option C. Proceed with ordering the alternative component, and then inform the relevant departments retrospectively, framing it as a necessary action taken to resolve a critical project issue. Option D. Ignore the potential delay and continue with the original procurement, hoping that the delay will be minimal and not significantly impact the project's overall success. The correct answer is B. Inform the project manager and procurement department of the potential delay and the alternative component option, and follow the established procedure for approving deviations or sourcing alternative materials, even if it takes additional time. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a candidate's understanding of ethical conduct and compliance within the Schneider Electric operational context. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the candidate to navigate a situation where a perceived shortcut could lead to significant compliance breaches and reputational damage, even if the intention is to expedite a process. Careful judgment is required to balance efficiency with adherence to established protocols and ethical standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency, adherence to documented procedures, and seeking appropriate guidance. This aligns with Schneider Electric's commitment to integrity and compliance, as mandated by general ethical business principles and likely reinforced by internal company policies. By escalating the issue through the proper channels, the individual demonstrates a commitment to upholding the company's values and regulatory obligations, preventing potential risks associated with unauthorized deviations. An incorrect approach that involves bypassing established procedures to achieve a faster outcome is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for internal controls and potentially regulatory requirements designed to ensure accuracy, fairness, and accountability. Such an action could lead to data integrity issues, financial misstatements, or even legal repercussions if the bypass procedure was in place to meet specific compliance mandates. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the assumption that the deviation is acceptable without verification, is equally problematic. This exhibits a lack of due diligence and an overestimation of personal judgment over established protocols. It fails to acknowledge the potential for unforeseen consequences or the importance of standardized processes for consistency and auditability. A further incorrect approach, which is to ignore the discrepancy and hope it goes unnoticed, is a clear ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to be complicit in potential noncompliance. It erodes trust within the organization and exposes Schneider Electric to significant risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies and procedures, a commitment to ethical conduct, and a proactive approach to seeking clarification or reporting concerns. When faced with a deviation from standard practice, professionals should first attempt to understand the rationale behind the established procedure. If a deviation seems necessary or beneficial, The next step is to consult relevant documentation or supervisors. If the situation remains unclear or involves potential risks, escalating the issue through the designated reporting lines, e.g., Manager, Compliance Department, is paramount. This ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of potential implications and in accordance with organizational and regulatory expectations. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that a new cloud-based project management tool offers significant potential for streamlining cross-departmental collaboration and improving project delivery timelines. However, the tool's integration would involve uploading sensitive project plans, financial projections, and employee contact information. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Schneider Electric's internal data governance policies and relevant industry data protection standards? Option A. Integrate the cloud tool with only basic security configurations, as default settings are generally adequate for most business operations. Option B. Immediately integrate the cloud tool to capitalize on its efficiency benefits, assuming the vendor's standard security measures are sufficient. Option C. Rely solely on the vendor's marketing materials and assurances regarding the tool's security and compliance without independent verification. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the cloud tool, verifying its security certifications, data encryption capabilities, and compliance with Schneider Electric's data privacy and security policies before integration. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the cloud tool, verifying its security certifications, data encryption capabilities, and compliance with Schneider Electric's data privacy and security policies before integration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for operational efficiency with the imperative of adhering to Schneider Electric's internal compliance policies and relevant industry standards for data handling and cybersecurity. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating potential risks associated with the use of third-party cloud services without proper due diligence, which could expose sensitive company data to unauthorized access or breaches. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any adopted solution aligns with both business objectives and regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment and the implementation of robust data security protocols before integrating any new cloud-based tool. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing data protection and compliance. Specifically, it necessitates understanding Schneider Electric's internal data governance policies, which would likely mandate vendor due diligence, data encryption standards, and access control mechanisms. Adhering to these internal guidelines, which are designed to meet or exceed external regulatory expectations for data privacy and security, e.g., GDPR principles if applicable to the data processed, or similar data protection laws relevant to Schneider Electric's operating jurisdictions, ensures that the company maintains a secure and compliant operational environment. This proactive stance prevents potential data breaches, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately adopting the new cloud tool to leverage its perceived efficiency gains without any prior assessment. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses essential data security and privacy protocols, potentially violating data protection laws by exposing sensitive information without adequate safeguards. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the company's responsibility to protect its data and the data of its stakeholders. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the vendor's assurances of security without independent verification. This is a failure in due diligence and risk management. While vendors have a responsibility to secure their platforms, Schneider Electric retains ultimate accountability for the data it entrusts to third parties. This approach could lead to regulatory noncompliance if the vendor's security measures are insufficient or if their claims are misleading, exposing the company to legal repercussions and data breach liabilities. A third incorrect approach is to implement the tool with minimal security configurations, assuming default settings are adequate. This is a failure to apply professional judgment and a lack of understanding of security best practices. Default configurations are often not optimized for specific organizational needs or the highest security standards. This can create vulnerabilities that are easily exploited, leading to data compromise and noncompliance with data protection regulations. that require appropriate technical and organizational measures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the operational need and then systematically evaluates potential solutions against established compliance frameworks and risk management principles. This involves 1. Identifying the specific data that will be processed and its sensitivity. 2. Reviewing Schneider Electric's internal policies on data security, cloud adoption, and third-party risk management. 3. Researching relevant external regulations pertaining to data privacy and cybersecurity in the jurisdictions where Schneider Electric operates and where the data resides. 4. Conducting thorough due diligence on any proposed third-party solution, including security certifications, data handling practices, and incident response plans. 5. Implementing appropriate technical and organizational controls, such as encryption, access management, and regular audits, before and during the use of the tool. 6. Establishing clear escalation paths for any identified risks or non-compliance issues. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals a potential 20% reduction in cycle time for a key manufacturing process through a proposed technological upgrade, but the data collection period was limited and did not account for seasonal variations in raw material availability. What is the most prudent next step to ensure the optimization initiative is both effective and ethically sound? Option A. Proceed with the technological upgrade immediately, as the projected 20% efficiency gain is significant, and the potential for minor disruptions due to seasonal variations is an acceptable risk. Option B. Focus solely on optimizing the software component of the proposed upgrade, assuming that hardware integration will naturally follow and that operational impacts are secondary to technological advancement. Option C. Conduct a more comprehensive data collection phase, including a full year cycle to capture seasonal impacts, and consult with the production floor team to validate the proposed upgrade's practical feasibility and potential unforeseen challenges. Option D. Commission a new, independent study to reevaluate the process from scratch, as the initial study's limitations render its findings entirely unreliable. The correct answer is C. Conduct a more comprehensive data collection phase, including a full year cycle to capture seasonal impacts, and consult with the production floor team to validate the proposed upgrade's practical feasibility and potential unforeseen challenges. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, where initial findings suggest a significant improvement, but the underlying data collection or interpretation might be flawed. The professional challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency with the need for accuracy and ethical data handling. Rushing to implement changes based on potentially incomplete or misinterpreted data can lead to wasted resources, decreased actual efficiency, and damage to professional credibility. Careful judgment is required to validate findings before committing to significant operational shifts. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough validation of the initial efficiency study's findings. This means meticulously reviewing the data collection methodology, ensuring all relevant variables were captured, and cross-referencing the results with other available operational metrics. It also entails seeking input from the teams directly involved in the processes being studied, as they possess invaluable on-the-ground knowledge that might not be apparent in raw data. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data integrity and a holistic understanding of the operational landscape. It aligns with ethical principles of responsible data use and decision-making, ensuring that improvements are genuine and sustainable, rather than superficial or based on erroneous assumptions. This methodical validation process minimizes the risk of costly errors and upholds the integrity of the optimization effort. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing changes immediately based solely on the initial study, without further validation, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the accuracy of the data driving the decision. This could lead to non-compliance with internal operational standards or even external regulations if the flawed optimization negatively impacts product quality or service delivery. Furthermore, it is ethically questionable to implement changes that could disrupt workflows or impact employee roles based on potentially inaccurate information. Focusing exclusively on the technology aspect of the proposed solution, while neglecting the human element and the practicalities of implementation, is also professionally unsound. This approach overlooks the potential for resistance, the need for training, and the impact on employee morale, all of which are critical for successful process optimization. Ethically, it fails to consider the well-being and effectiveness of the workforce. Ignoring the initial study entirely because of a perceived complexity or a preference for established methods is a failure to embrace opportunities for improvement. While caution is warranted, outright dismissal of potentially valuable insights is unprofessional and can lead to stagnation, hindering the company's competitive edge and potentially violating implicit ethical obligations to seek continuous improvement. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization with a structured, data-driven, and ethically grounded methodology. This involves 1. Initial assessment, understanding the problem and gathering preliminary data. 2. Hypothesis generation, forming potential solutions or areas for improvement. 3. Data validation, rigorously verifying the accuracy and completeness of the data supporting the hypothesis. This includes reviewing methodologies, seeking corroborating evidence, and consulting with subject matter experts. 4. Impact analysis, evaluating the potential benefits, risks, and resource requirements of proposed changes, considering both technical and human factors. 5. Pilot testing, where feasible, implementing changes on a smaller scale to test their effectiveness and identify unforeseen issues. 6. Full implementation, rolling out validated and refined solutions. 7. Continuous monitoring, tracking performance post-implementation to ensure sustained benefits and identify further optimization opportunities. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and lead to genuine, sustainable improvements. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, less energy-intensive manufacturing process could significantly reduce operational expenses over the next 5 years. However, the initial capital investment for this new process is substantial, and there are concerns about the disposal of byproducts from the older, less efficient process, which may require specialized and costly environmental handling. The company is operating under the Schneider Electric Hiring Assessment Test specified regulatory framework, which emphasizes sustainable operations and environmental stewardship. Which of the following approaches best navigates this decision, considering both financial prudence and regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with the new manufacturing process immediately to capture cost savings, deferring detailed environmental impact studies until after implementation, and addressing byproduct disposal only if regulatory issues arise. Option B. Maintain the current manufacturing process to avoid the upfront capital expenditure and the complexities of byproduct disposal, focusing on incremental efficiency improvements that do not require significant investment or environmental review. Option C. Implement the new manufacturing process, but seek the cheapest available option for disposing of byproducts from both processes, regardless of long-term environmental implications or potential regulatory scrutiny. Option D. Prioritize the new manufacturing process, conducting a thorough environmental impact assessment for both the new process's byproducts and the disposal of the old process's byproducts, and engaging with relevant environmental regulatory bodies to ensure full compliance and explore potential incentives for sustainable practices. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the new manufacturing process, conducting a thorough environmental impact assessment for both the new process's byproducts and the disposal of the old process's byproducts, and engaging with relevant environmental regulatory bodies to ensure full compliance and explore potential incentives for sustainable practices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate cost savings with long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance. The decision-maker must consider not only the financial implications, but also the potential environmental impact and the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to avoid short-sighted decisions that could lead to future liabilities or reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive evaluation that includes environmental impact assessments and stakeholder consultation. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and sustainable business practices, which are increasingly mandated or encouraged by regulatory frameworks. By proactively identifying and mitigating environmental risks, the company demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to ethical operations. thereby safeguarding its long-term viability and reputation. This approach also ensures adherence to environmental regulations by integrating compliance considerations from the outset. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering environmental consequences fails to meet regulatory obligations related to environmental protection and pollution control. This can lead to significant fines, legal challenges, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that ignores potential long-term operational disruptions due to unforeseen environmental issues demonstrates a lack of foresight and risk management, which is a failure in professional duty. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses stakeholder consultation, particularly with local communities or environmental groups, can lead to public opposition and operational delays, highlighting an ethical failure in transparency and engagement. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and objectives. This should be followed by identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. A thorough assessment of all potential solutions, including their costs, benefits, risks, and impacts, both financial and non-financial, including environmental and social, is crucial. This assessment should be informed by relevant regulations and ethical guidelines. Finally, the chosen solution should be implemented with ongoing monitoring and evaluation to ensure it meets objectives and remains compliant and ethical. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that a critical project deadline is fast approaching, and a key piece of client data, essential for the next phase of work, needs to be transferred. The standard, secure, and approved method for data transfer is currently experiencing technical difficulties, causing significant delays. A colleague suggests using a readily available but unapproved and less secure cloud sharing service that can transfer the data almost instantly. The project manager is under immense pressure to meet the deadline. Option A. Proceed with transferring the data using the unapproved cloud sharing service to ensure the project deadline is met, assuming the risk is minimal given the urgency. Option B. Inform the client that the project will be significantly delayed due to technical issues with data transfer and await further instructions without exploring alternative solutions. Option C. Immediately escalate the issue to the IT security and compliance departments, outlining the technical difficulties with the approved method and requesting urgent guidance on an alternative secure transfer protocol or a temporary waiver for an approved alternative, while also informing the client of the potential delay and the steps being taken. Option D. Attempt to bypass the technical difficulties with the approved method by independently configuring a workaround on the unapproved cloud sharing service to enhance its security before transferring the data. Correct answer is C. Immediately escalate the issue to the IT security and compliance departments, outlining the technical difficulties with the approved method and requesting urgent guidance on an alternative secure transfer protocol or a temporary waiver for an approved alternative, while also informing the client of the potential delay and the steps being taken. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for operational efficiency with the imperative of adhering to Schneider Electric's internal code of conduct and relevant industry best practices, specifically concerning data privacy and security. The pressure to deliver a project on time, coupled with the temptation to bypass established protocols for expediency, requires careful ethical and professional judgment. Misinterpreting or ignoring these protocols can lead to significant reputational damage, legal repercussions, and a breach of trust with clients and stakeholders. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy. By immediately escalating the issue to the relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., IT security, legal, or compliance departments, and seeking guidance on the appropriate, secure method for data transfer, the employee demonstrates adherence to established protocols and a commitment to data integrity and client confidentiality. This aligns with Schneider Electric's likely internal policies and general principles of data protection, which prioritize security and compliance over speed when sensitive information is involved. This approach upholds professional integrity and mitigates potential risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the data transfer using the unapproved method. This is a direct violation of internal security policies and potentially data protection regulations. It exposes sensitive client data to unauthorized access or breaches, leading to severe legal penalties, financial losses, and irreparable damage to Schneider Electric's reputation. Ethically, it represents a failure to protect client information and a disregard for established trust. Another incorrect approach is to delay the project indefinitely without seeking alternative solutions or guidance. While seemingly cautious, this inaction can lead to missed deadlines, client dissatisfaction, and potential contractual breaches. It fails to address the operational challenge proactively and demonstrates a lack of problem-solving initiative within the established compliance framework. It also risks creating a perception of inefficiency. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to fix the security issue independently without proper authorization or expertise. This could inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or misconfigure security settings, leading to a more severe breach than if the issue had been handled by the designated security teams. It bypasses established procedures and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the specialized nature of cybersecurity. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should first identify the core conflict between operational demands and compliance requirements. The decision-making process should involve 1. Recognizing the potential risks associated with each course of action. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures related to data security and project management. 3. Seeking clarification and guidance from relevant departments e.g., IT, legal. Compliance. 4. Prioritizing compliance and security, even if it means a slight delay over immediate expediency. 5. Documenting all communications and decisions made. Question 15. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new external data source has the potential to significantly improve the accuracy of sales forecasts. However, the origin and validation processes for this data are not immediately clear. What is the most appropriate initial step to take? Option A. Reject the new data source entirely due to the lack of immediate clarity regarding its validation processes, prioritizing the avoidance of any potential risks. Option B. Rely on the vendor's assurance that the data is accurate and proceed with integration, assuming their internal controls are sufficient. Option C. Conduct a thorough due diligence process to understand the data source's origin, methodology, and validation procedures, and perform a pilot test to assess its impact and reliability before full integration. Option D. Immediately integrate the new data source into the existing forecasting system to leverage its potential benefits as quickly as possible. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough due diligence process to understand the data source's origin, methodology, and validation procedures, and perform a pilot test to assess its impact and reliability before full integration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to balance the need for timely information with the imperative to maintain data integrity and comply with internal control frameworks. The challenge lies in identifying potential risks associated with a new data source and determining the most appropriate method for its integration without compromising existing compliance protocols. Careful judgment is required to avoid both overcaution, which could stifle innovation and efficiency, and overenthusiasm, which could lead to the adoption of unreliable data and subsequent regulatory breaches. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, risk-based evaluation of the new data source. This aligns with established principles of data governance and internal control, which mandate that any new data input or system modification undergo a thorough assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities, inaccuracies, or compliance gaps. By involving relevant stakeholders and conducting a pilot test, the organization ensures that the data source is validated for accuracy, relevance, and security before full integration. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of introducing errors into critical business processes or violating data privacy regulations, thereby upholding the company's commitment to compliance and operational excellence. An incorrect approach that involves immediate integration without prior validation poses significant regulatory and ethical failures. It bypasses essential due diligence, potentially leading to the use of inaccurate or misleading data in decision-making, which could result in financial misstatements or non-compliance with reporting standards. Another incorrect approach, which is to reject the new data source outright due to a lack of immediate understanding, represents a failure in innovation and efficiency. while caution is necessary. An outright rejection without any attempt at assessment stifles potential improvements and may lead to the organization falling behind competitors or missing opportunities for operational enhancement. This demonstrates a lack of adaptability and a failure to engage with evolving technological landscapes in a responsible manner. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, clearly define the objective of integrating the new data source. Second, identify potential risks and benefits associated with its adoption. Third, develop a phased integration plan that includes pilot testing and validation. Fourth, engage relevant subject matter experts and stakeholders throughout the process. Finally, establish clear metrics for evaluating the success and impact of the integrated data source, ensuring ongoing monitoring for compliance and performance. Question 16. System analysis indicates that a critical component for an ongoing Schneider Electric project is experiencing an unexpected manufacturing delay from a third-party supplier, potentially impacting the project's go-live date by 2 weeks. The project manager is aware of this delay, but has not yet informed the project sponsor or client. What is the most professionally appropriate course of action? Option A. Focus on finding an alternative supplier for the component without informing the current sponsor or client about the original supplier's delay. Option B. Immediately inform the project sponsor and client of the delay, its potential impact, and the mitigation strategies being explored. Option C. Continue with the project as planned, assuming the delay can be absorbed without affecting the final deadline. Option D. Wait to inform the project sponsor and client until a definitive revised delivery date for the component is confirmed by the supplier. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform the project sponsor and client of the delay, its potential impact, and the mitigation strategies being explored. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in project management where a critical component's delivery is delayed, impacting the project timeline and potentially client satisfaction. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely project completion with the ethical obligation to be transparent with stakeholders and to avoid misrepresenting the project's status. The pressure to meet deadlines can lead to temptation to downplay or conceal issues, which is professionally unsound and carries significant regulatory and ethical risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent communication with the project sponsor and relevant stakeholders. This demonstrates accountability and allows for collaborative problem solving. By proactively informing stakeholders about the delay, its cause, and the proposed mitigation strategies, the project manager upholds the ethical principle of honesty and integrity. This aligns with professional conduct guidelines that emphasize clear and timely reporting of project status, including risks and issues. It also allows stakeholders to make informed decisions regarding project scope, timeline adjustments, or resource allocation, thereby managing expectations effectively and maintaining trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying communication until the issue is resolved or a workaround is found. This is professionally unacceptable because it violates the duty of transparency and can be construed as an attempt to mislead stakeholders. Such a delay can lead to a loss of trust and may have regulatory implications if it constitutes a breach of contractual obligations or reporting requirements. It also prevents stakeholders from intervening or offering support, potentially exacerbating the problem. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the project as if the delay is minor or inconsequential, without informing the sponsor. This is a failure of due diligence and professional responsibility. It risks the project's success by not accounting for the impact of the delayed component and can lead to significant downstream problems. Ethically, it is dishonest to present a project as on track when a critical element is compromised. A third incorrect approach is to blame external factors without providing a clear plan for mitigation or seeking collaborative solutions. While external factors may contribute to delays, a professional response requires taking ownership of managing the impact and developing a strategy to overcome the obstacle. Merely pointing fingers without a proactive plan is a sign of poor problem solving and a lack of commitment to project success. It also fails to engage stakeholders in finding solutions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and transparent approach to project management. When faced with unforeseen issues like component delays, the decision-making process should prioritize 1. Immediate assessment of the impact. Understand the full scope of the delay and its consequences. 2. Internal consultation. Discuss the issue with the team to identify root causes and potential solutions. 3. Transparent communication. Inform all relevant stakeholders, project sponsor, client, etc. Promptly and clearly about the situation, its impact and proposed actions. 4. Collaborative problem solving. Work with stakeholders to adjust plans, reallocate resources, or modify scope as necessary. 5. Documentation. Maintain thorough records of all communications, decisions, and actions taken. This structured approach ensures accountability, fosters trust, and maximizes the chances of successful project delivery despite challenges. Question 17. Strategic planning requires a sales representative to assess a potential client's needs and propose the most suitable Schneider Electric solution. During a sales meeting, a client expresses a need for a specific advanced feature that the current product offering does not fully support, though a future update is planned. The sales representative is under pressure to meet their quarterly sales target. What is the most professional and compliant course of action? Option A. Assure the client that the current product can be adapted to meet their needs, implying the advanced feature is fully functional, with the intention of addressing any shortcomings after the sale is closed. Option B. Emphasize the product's existing functionalities and downplay the importance of the missing advanced feature, suggesting the client can manage without it for now. Option C. Clearly explain the current product's capabilities and limitations regarding the requested feature. Inform the client about the planned future update, and offer the current solution as the best available option, or suggest an alternative if one exists. Option D. Promise the client that the advanced feature will be immediately available through a custom integration, even though this is not a standard offering and requires significant development effort. The correct answer is C. Clearly explain the current product's capabilities and limitations regarding the requested feature, inform the client about the planned future update, and offer the current solution as the best available option, or suggest an alternative if one exists. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a sales representative, driven by personal performance targets, is tempted to misrepresent a product's capabilities to secure a deal. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate pressure to meet sales quotas with the long-term ethical and regulatory obligations of the company. Schneider Electric, as a global leader, operates under stringent codes of conduct and regulatory frameworks that prohibit deceptive sales practices. The representative must exercise sound judgment to avoid actions that could lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a breach of trust with the client. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves transparently communicating the product's actual capabilities and limitations, even if it means potentially losing the immediate sale. This aligns with Schneider Electric's commitment to ethical business practices and regulatory compliance, which typically includes principles of honesty, fairness, and accurate representation in all dealings. Adhering to these principles safeguards the company from potential litigation, regulatory fines, and damage to its brand reputation. It also fosters long-term client relationships built on trust, which is a cornerstone of sustainable business growth. This approach prioritizes integrity over short-term gains, reflecting best professional practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. Misrepresenting the product's capabilities to meet the client's perceived needs, even with the intention of upselling later, constitutes a direct violation of ethical sales conduct and potentially consumer protection laws. This practice erodes trust, can lead to client dissatisfaction, product returns, and legal challenges. It also exposes the company to accusations of fraud or misrepresentation. Promising features that are not yet developed or are in beta testing without clear disclaimers is also a regulatory and ethical failure. This is a form of deceptive advertising and can lead to contractual disputes if the client relies on these unproven promises. It violates the principle of providing accurate information about the product's current state and availability. Focusing solely on the client's stated budget without clarifying the product's actual suitability for their needs, and then pushing a product that doesn't fully meet those needs, is a failure of professional responsibility. While budget is important, the primary obligation is to ensure the product sold is fit for purpose. This approach can lead to a client investing in a solution that ultimately fails to deliver, resulting in significant financial loss for the client and reputational damage for Schneider Electric. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical and regulatory principles at play: honesty, accuracy, client best interest. 2. Evaluating the potential consequences of each action, both short-term and long-term, for all stakeholders, client, company, self. 3. Consulting internal company policies and seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments if unsure. 4. Choosing the option that upholds integrity and compliance, even if it presents immediate challenges. In this case, transparent communication and offering the most suitable, albeit potentially less profitable, solution is the professional and compliant path. Question 18. Operational review demonstrates a significant increase in material waste during the production of a key electrical component, leading to higher than anticipated manufacturing costs. The production manager is under pressure to reduce these costs immediately. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation? Option A. Reduce the frequency of quality control inspections on the affected component to lower labor expenses associated with checks. Option B. Immediately switch to a less expensive raw material that appears similar, without conducting thorough testing or seeking regulatory approval, to achieve quick cost savings. Option C. Continue current production processes and focus cost-saving efforts on other areas of the operation, deferring the investigation of the waste issue. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis of the increased waste, involving engineering and quality assurance teams, to identify sustainable solutions that maintain product integrity and regulatory compliance. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis of the increased waste, involving engineering and quality assurance teams, to identify sustainable solutions that maintain product integrity and regulatory compliance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for cost savings and the long-term implications of compromising established safety protocols. The pressure to reduce expenditure, especially in a manufacturing environment like Schneider Electric, can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly efficient in the short term, carry significant risks. The challenge lies in balancing financial objectives with the paramount responsibility of ensuring product safety and compliance with regulatory standards, which are non-negotiable. Careful judgment is required to identify solutions that achieve cost efficiencies without jeopardizing quality or safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the root cause of the increased waste, followed by a data-driven assessment of potential solutions. This includes evaluating alternative materials or processes that meet quality and safety standards while offering cost benefits. Engaging with the engineering and quality assurance teams ensures that any proposed changes are technically sound and compliant with relevant regulation. This methodical, evidence-based approach aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing safety, quality, and regulatory adherence. It demonstrates a commitment to sustainable and responsible operational management, reflecting Schneider Electric's values and the stringent requirements of industry regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately implement a cheaper, unverified alternative material without rigorous testing or regulatory review. This fails to comply with quality assurance protocols and potentially violates product safety regulations, as the new material might not perform to the required standards under operational stress, leading to product defects or failures. This also bypasses the ethical obligation to provide safe and reliable products. Another incorrect approach is to simply reduce the frequency of quality control checks to save on labor costs. This directly contravenes regulatory requirements for product testing and inspection, increasing the risk of defective products reaching the market. It also represents an ethical failure to uphold the company's commitment to quality and customer safety, potentially leading to reputational damage and legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the waste issue and focus solely on other cost-saving initiatives. This demonstrates a lack of proactive problem-solving and a failure to address operational inefficiencies. It neglects the potential financial and environmental impact of excessive waste and misses an opportunity to improve processes, which is a core aspect of operational excellence and responsible business conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured problem-solving framework. This begins with clearly defining the problem and its potential impact, Next, gather all relevant data and information. Then, brainstorm and evaluate potential solutions, considering their feasibility, cost-effectiveness, and most importantly, their compliance with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. The chosen solution should be the one that best balances operational efficiency with safety, quality, and regulatory adherence. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of implemented solutions are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 19. Comparative studies suggest that in competitive business environments, the temptation to gain an advantage through external expertise can be strong. Imagine a scenario where a competitor has recently launched a product with features that appear to be based on proprietary technology. Your company is considering hiring an independent consultant with a background in that specific technology to help analyze the competitor's product and identify potential areas for innovation. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action to take in this situation? Option A. Initiate discussions with the consultant without any formal agreement, relying on a verbal understanding that they will not disclose any sensitive information they might encounter during their analysis. Option B. Proceed with hiring the consultant and allow them to explore the competitor's technology freely, assuming that any insights gained will be beneficial and that formal documentation is unnecessary for informal advisory roles. Option C. Instruct the consultant to focus on publicly available information and avoid any direct analysis of the competitor's proprietary technology, even if it means limiting the depth of their insights. Option D. Engage the consultant after clearly defining the scope of work, establishing a formal contract with strict confidentiality clauses, and obtaining all necessary internal approvals to ensure transparency and prevent conflicts of interest. The correct answer is D. Engage the consultant after clearly defining the scope of work, establishing a formal contract with strict confidentiality clauses, and obtaining all necessary internal approvals to ensure transparency and prevent conflicts of interest. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to ethical conduct and compliance within a business context, specifically concerning the potential for conflicts of interest and the misuse of proprietary information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to leverage external expertise for business advantage against the imperative to maintain confidentiality and avoid unfair competitive practices. The pressure to secure a competitive edge can tempt individuals to overlook or downplay ethical considerations, requiring careful judgment and adherence to established guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance by seeking explicit authorization and establishing clear boundaries before engaging external consultants. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency, fairness, and the protection of intellectual property. It aligns with professional ethical codes that mandate avoiding conflicts of interest and acting with integrity. By formally documenting the engagement and outlining the scope of work and confidentiality agreements, the company safeguards itself from potential legal and reputational damage, ensuring that any insights gained are acquired through legitimate and ethical means. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust with stakeholders and upholding the company's reputation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the engagement without formal approval or clear guidelines. This creates a significant risk of actual or perceived conflicts of interest. It fails to uphold the principle of transparency and could lead to the unauthorized disclosure or use of confidential information, violating ethical obligations and potentially company policy. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to obtain the information indirectly through informal channels or by encouraging the consultant to discover it without explicit instruction. This is ethically dubious as it circumvents proper procedures and could still result in the misuse of proprietary information. It demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to engage in potentially unethical shortcuts. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the need for formal agreements, believing that a verbal understanding is sufficient. This is a critical failure in professional practice. Verbal agreements are difficult to enforce and provide no concrete protection against breaches of confidentiality or conflicts of interest. It exposes the company to significant legal and ethical risk due to the lack of documented consent and defined responsibilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the potential ethical and regulatory implications. Second, consult relevant company policies, codes of conduct, and any applicable external regulations. Third, seek guidance from legal or compliance departments. Fourth, prioritize transparency and formal documentation in all engagements, especially those involving external parties and sensitive information. Finally, always err on the side of caution and ensure that all actions are defensible from an ethical and legal standpoint. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential noncompliance issue related to the consistent application of performance review criteria across a specific department. To investigate this, you need to review recent performance evaluations. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical professional conduct? Option A. Informing the department manager that the issue is too complex to investigate without direct access to all employee records and advising them to proceed as usual. Option B. Directly accessing the individual performance review files of all employees in the department without prior consultation with HR or legal. Option C. Requesting anonymized aggregate data on performance review outcomes from the HR department, along with a summary of the criteria used, to identify any systemic discrepancies. Option D. Sending a broad email to all employees in the department asking them to voluntarily submit their performance reviews for review. The correct answer is C. Requesting anonymized aggregate data on performance review outcomes from the HR department, along with a summary of the criteria used, to identify any systemic discrepancies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information to address a potential compliance issue with the obligation to protect sensitive employee data. The pressure to act quickly to mitigate risk must be weighed against the legal and ethical implications of unauthorized data access. The core challenge lies in identifying a method to gather necessary information without violating privacy regulations or company policy. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a lawful and ethical method of obtaining information. It involves a structured process that respects data privacy while still enabling the investigation. This approach aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and fair treatment of employees. By seeking guidance from HR and legal, the professional ensures that any information gathering is conducted within established legal and ethical boundaries, minimizing the risk of regulatory noncompliance and potential legal repercussions. This upholds the principle of least privilege and due process. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly accessing employee performance records without authorization. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates data privacy laws e.g. GDPR if applicable, or equivalent local data protection legislation, by accessing personal data without a legitimate business need or proper consent. It also breaches company policy regarding data access and employee privacy, potentially leading to disciplinary action and legal claims from affected employees. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the potential compliance issue due to the difficulty in obtaining information. This represents a failure in risk management and a dereliction of professional duty. It allows a potential compliance breach to persist, which could lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities for Schneider Electric. It also demonstrates a lack of proactive problem solving and a disregard for regulatory obligations. A third incorrect approach might involve broadly requesting all employee performance data from managers, even if not directly relevant to the specific compliance concern. This is an overreach and a potential violation of data minimization principles, which are often embedded in privacy regulations. It exposes more data than necessary, increasing the risk of a data breach and violating the privacy of employees whose data is not pertinent to the investigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, clearly define the problem and the information required. Second, identify all relevant internal policies and external regulations governing data access and employee privacy. Third, consult with appropriate internal stakeholders, such as legal, HR, and compliance departments, to understand the legal and ethical constraints. Fourth, explore the least intrusive methods for obtaining the necessary information, always prioritizing data minimization and lawful access. Fifth, document all steps taken and decisions made to ensure accountability and provide a clear audit trail.